Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY called Clint Stone Chapter 9 Fireproof, written by some guy named Ted. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Stone doesn't burn. Get it hot enough and it'll melt, but it does not burn. Much the same as a human called Clint Stone. He has been in enough fires that he should be nothing but ash. But he still roams this universe. The first time I saw Clint Stone survive a fire was when we were at the Covius Quadrant and I noticed a space station was burning. It had fallen under the attack by pirates and they had set it alight and left the passengers to burn. This was a few weeks after Clint's rescue of the Benassi girl. "Look, there's a station ahead. We can get supplies there," I told Clint as he flew Susan through the warp space to the Converse Quadrant. The quadrant was one of the more uninhabited portions of the galaxy, lacking most of everything needed for life. But there were people who lived out here, in stations floating amongst the stars, a few candles of civilization burning amongst the darkness of space. He grunted, keeping his eyes on the viewport in front of him. He seemed unusually melancholy. I didn't know it, but today was the anniversary of his marriage, so I tried again. "It's the only one around for 100 light years. We need to stop somewhere," I insisted. "Fine," he grunted as he dropped out of warp, pointing the Susan towards the station. We approached in silence, waiting for the lookout to hail us. The call never came. We grew closer and closer to the station, but there was no reaction as we got closer. I saw the flicker of a large viewport in the hull. Something was wrong. "Something's not right," I said to Clint. "They should have hailed us by now." We drew closer, and I could see a flicker of what it was. Fire. On a station. There is perhaps no greater disaster than fire. Hull breaches can be patched up, pirates can be repelled, but fire, once it got to the pipes, was impossible to stop. It burned through until the oxygen was gone, and the fuel exploded. The passengers could get off the ships and lifeboats, but out here, in the middle of the Converse Quadrant, no one would be around to pick them up before they turned to coffins. "Fire! It's on fire!" I shouted. Clint looked up and saw it too. I saw his eyes widened. "Go into the bay and get a suit," he told me, "and open up the coupler." No, he couldn't be thinking what I thought he was thinking. "We're going to save as many as we can." "What? Are you crazy? We can't go in there," I shouted. "It's on fire." "Yes, it is, and there are people on board. I will not leave them to burn while I can do something about it," Clint shouted back. "We are going in, and we are going to save them. Go get the suits." Clint was insane. I know I've said that before, but this time I meant it. Willingly going into a burning station, one that could go off at any moment, was crazy. Regardless, I went down to the bay and gathered our suits. They were suits for Clint's invention, light and mobile, but extremely tough and resistant to damage. He used them to walk outside the ship for emergency repairs in space, and he used them to fight more than once. They managed to stop direct shots from plasma rifles, so I guess they would be able to hold up against fire. I quickly pulled mine on and strapping in tight. I didn't want a single space for the fire to reach through. My fur was fairly flammable, and a suit, there was nothing that I could do but put it out. The floor jerked as I almost fell over. Clint must have attached our ship to theirs. He ran down into the bay and slipped into his suit. "Open the doors," he said. I positioned us right on over the emergency doors. It should be no trouble to get in. "When we do get in, I want you to follow me. We'll go in through the control room. From there, we should be able to get onto the speakers. We can then find out where we're needed." I nodded, my stomach clenched tight as my limbs shaking. I pushed a button and the bay doors slid open. Outside of them was a grey expanse of the station's emergency doors. Clint wasted no time in smashing them open, leaving a space large enough for even him to fit through. We entered into the room behind the door. In here, you couldn't tell that the station was on fire. It was calm, peaceful. Clint opened the door leading into the station and shattered that piece. The first thing I noticed was the sound. A dull roar permeated the hallway, low and dangerous. At the end, under the doorway, I could see the faint orange light of the fire. Clint wasted no time in sightseeing and rushed down the hallway. I followed him, figuring that it was any way I was going to survive this semi-voluntary trip to Hull, I'd be best to stick next to Clint. As we rushed past the room, Clint stopped at the backtrack. He ran into the room and began to meddle with the speakers on the wall. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Aren't we supposed to be going to the bridge?" "If I can hack into the system from here, it'll save time, and every second could be another life saved," Clint replied, still fiddling with the panel. "Got it." He removed his helmet and spoke into the speaker, his voice booming in the station. "Passengers of the station, this is not your captain speaking. We were flying by and noticed the fire. We are here to help in the situation. Please go to your ships and lifeboats. For those of you in the upper starboard section, our ship is docked at the end of B Hall. Godspeed." Almost before he finished speaking, the people began to rush down the hallway, filling it. Our ship's bay began to fill with people, and Clint walked amongst them, asking if they needed any help. One of them told him something, and he straightened immediately, turning to me. He spoke. "Dedex, the fire started in C Hall, and there are dozens of people trapped down there. Let's go." He rushed out into the bay, pulling on his helmet. We ran past several people fleeing to our ship, and they gave us directions to Hall C. Clint nearly flew down the hallways, his feet barely touching the ground as we rounded the corner, and we saw Hall C. It was a hellish sight. The fire was the worst here, climbing the walls, painting them with a bloody orange. The smoke filled the top half of the corridor, and I could see the bodies huddled on the ground. Without pausing, Clint ran straight into the fire. I took a deep breath and followed him, praying to the gods that I had stopped believing in after my 10th name day. I passed him through the fire unarmed, and the suits really did work. All I felt was a slight warming sensation on the bottoms of my feet. Ahead, Clint threw his shoulder against the door, and it gave way before him, and the people spilled out of the room. "Run! Go!" Clint shouted at them. "Get to the ship!" They ran past us, tears of relief running down their faces. We traveled deeper into the fiery passageway. I saw bodies on the ground, their flesh melted. There was nothing Clint could have done, and so we left them. We searched room by room, pulling people out and sending them on their way. But soon it grew too hot to let them go on their own. We had to pick them up and carry them through the fire, or it would have burned the skin on their feet. We got them out of the fire and then turned back for more. Clint threw 2 or 3 over his shoulder with each trip, and I managed one. They sobbed, clutching at us, as we pulled them from the flame, thanking us with all of their hearts. The sight of it, that relief, was enough for me to put aside my fear and focus on helping as many as I could. We made 3 trips into the inferno, saving 10 or more lives. On the 4th one, a pipe exploded in the wall, the shock of sending us flying, and giving fuel to the blaze. It climbed the walls, roaring. Clint was the first to set his feet as he dragged me from the burning hallway into the room. While not completely safe, it had been considerably less flames than the hallway. I struggled to stand and noticed that I could feel the heat on my arm. I looked down and saw that my suit was torn, likely from the shrapnel of the burst pipe. Clint noticed it and started to pull off his own suit. "What are you doing?" I asked. "You need to get people out. It'll do more good on you than on me. Take it." His tone left no room to argue. I pulled my suit off and pulled his on, and Clint designed his suits to be easily removed and put on. A great foresight on his part. I placed the helmet on my head and nodded. Clint yanked the door open, and we returned to the hull. Its next rooms were empty, until finally there were only 2 left. The fire had grown worse, the walls groaned, and the roar was no longer dull. Clint smashed down the door at the right, and I took the one on the left. In Clint's there were 2 small children lying on the ground, unconscious from smoke inhalation. Clint pulled his shirt and wrapped them around the kids, as he gathered them up into his arm and ran down the hallway, disappearing into the flames. In my room there was just a young Skillian boy, huddled under the table, tears streaming down his face. I rushed into the room, moved to his side. As I motioned to pick him up, the ceiling groaned, a sharp, wrenching noise, and I threw myself over the boy as the ceiling collapsed. A beam crushed into my back, and I felt several ribs break. But I held firm. The boy crawled out from under me and stood screaming in the corner. My arms gave way beneath the weight and I fell. I lay on my side, breathing forced through my lungs, pinned by a heavy beam. I turned to the boy. "It'll be all right. You will get out of here. Take this," I said to the boy in what I tried to make a calm, reassuring voice, but came out more like wheezes. I pulled off my helmet, and as much as the upper suit as I could. I tossed him to the boy. "Put these on. They should protect you long enough for—" I started coughing on the smoke. I could feel the heat on the beam sinking deeper into my body, and the suit wasn't going to last much longer. I shifted as best I could under the beam and pushed. The beam moved a fraction of an inch, and I fell into another coughing fit. I gained control of my breath and tried again, my vision growing blurry. "Don't worry, kid. He'll be coming soon," I said, unsure if I meant Clint or Faust, the god of death. The room grew darker and blurrier as the smoke filled and my eyes started to fail. I could feel my body shutting down. The skeleton boy was still crying in the corner, so he was still alive. That was good. I could still feel my mind slow, and I prepared for the end. The room went dark. With a scream, the beam above me shot to the other side of the room, and I was free. Over me stood a being of stone, untouched by the flames of hell burning around him. A grim smile on his face. Clint reached down and gathered me in his arms. He lifted me like I was a feather. Grabbing the boy in the other arm, he burst out into the hallway, which was nothing but fire now. I was surprised that it was even still the cohesive shape. It looked like it should have melted into a puddle. Clint sprinted down the hallway, jumping over the fallen beams and dodging fire sprouts from the wall. The fire had reached the pipes, and it was only a matter of time before the fuel blew, taking the station and us with it. He ran out of the sea hall, and the fire had not ended there. In our time at Sea Hall, the fire had spread, engulfing half of the station. The heat was intense, and I could feel it in my bones, a seemingly solid wall. B-Hall appeared out of the smoke as Clint ran, fire on both sides. He pushed through to safety, leaping aboard Susan, and then closed the door behind us. Clint collapsed on the floor. The boy and I spilled from his arms. Clint forced his way to his feet and screamed at the cabin. "Go, go, go! It's going to hit the fuel!" The ship jolted and dropped away from the station. The rear viewport showed the station shrinking as we flew away. A bright flash came from the windows, and they exploded outwards. The lights cut out and the void rushed in, sucking the oxygen from the station, killing the fire. "See, I told you that we would make it," I said to the kid lying on the floor next to me. Clint laughed, bent over at the waist, and then dropping to the floor. His laughter turned to coughing, but it soon stopped. He rolled over facing me. "Let's never do that again," he said. "We almost died." We laughed until tears fell from our eyes. I don't know why we found this so funny, but it was the funniest thing that I had ever heard. It must have been the lack of oxygen and the trauma of nearly dying. But even while we laughed, I knew that if Clint ever asked me to do something like that again, I would, without hesitation. His human crazy must be rubbing off. The pilot came down from the cabin and thanked us, with tears in his eyes, for saving his son. The skeleton boy I saved from the beam. Clint climbed back into the driver's seat and took the refugees to the nearest Universal Hospital, where they met up with the rest of the passengers from the station. I got my ribs looked over and was told that I would heal nicely. Clint was checked for injuries, but he had none, other than a little smoke inhalation. You see, Clint is so capable around fire, he's a damn near fireproof. We did things like that again. Not the burning station, but we did save a bunch of people from fire and other disaster, and every time I didn't hesitate. It seems if you are around human enough, you become one. End of chapter. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.